button. Excellent. Great. Thanks, Ed. That's really cool. Okay, so I look at that picture of Ed. He looks proper school. That looks like a school photo almost. It's brilliant. Right. Okay. So first of all, thanks very much for inviting me to talk to you all, and it's lovely to be able to get a link back into Cumbria this afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, I was ringing in Cumbria, up until about 2014. So I started ringing in the Western Lakes, I suppose, or western side of Cumbria, at Arlecdon and Whitehaven, Cleatormore occasionally. So I used to ring with Ed a fair bit then, and it was really good laugh, really, really good fun. So I think that's the important thing, really, is to remember what's really, really good fun about ringing, and when we're trying to talk about it and encourage new people to do it. So that's always like the massive advantage, is it gets you out of the house on a dark, windy, cold night, doesn't it? And you can have a bit of a laugh up the tower, and it's all good fun. So I went to after being in Cumbria up in the western side, I went to be head brewer at Cumbrian Legendary Ales down in the South Lakes. So if any of you have ever drunk a pint of Loweswater Gold, that was me. Woo! But in 2014, I got headhunted down to Sharps in Cornwall. So I've spent the last couple of years down here working for Sharps, and now I'm a consultant for the brewing industry. So I've really enjoyed my time in Cumbria, and also Cornwall's treated me very well as well, so that's good. I have, in the last year or so, I suppose, with being locked down and things, we've been encouraged really just to, I suppose, have a bit of a retrospective think about what we've been doing so far, and you know, what we'd like to change maybe in the future, and been slightly scared about coming back to ringing, and what, you know, who might not, and what we might have to do to recover. So I remember thinking, you know, on many lockdown walks with my 5-year-old son, you know, what could I actually do to enable a swift and brilliant recovery, you know, of ringing. So I kind of was thinking, you know, what can I do? I'm not in charge of anything. I'm not a tower captain. I'm not doing anything in particular. I miss ringing a lot though. So I thought, right, well, we probably need to think about this in a slightly different way to be able to survive the future. So I will try and just share this now, share the screen. I don't know if you can see, and if we can go from the beginning. I don't know if that will work. There we go. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, looks great.
Excellent. So I have done a couple of talks about, you know, recovery and wanting to enthuse people to get going again and embrace it and stuff. So Leslie Belcher actually from Art asked me to do this graphic, and I think it summarizes things as we are quite like now, really, in that, you know, if we can embrace some opportunities for change, if we can use our teamwork and our networks to maybe, you know, tackle the challenges together. If we can do that, be kind to one another. We've all had a really tough couple of years, haven't we, getting through this? And make the plans that you know, if you made any plans in the lockdown period, then try and make those a reality. You know, it's all good thoughts, isn't it? But some action would be really good. So to think big, really, and start small, and see where you end up. Really, there's no right or wrong. Down here in Cornwall, then, I would describe us as in special measures, and I keep saying to people, I think we're in special measures. We need to think out the box. We need to think more radically than just getting back to ringing and just having a nice time. We probably need to be thinking about effective teamwork with one another, so using those networks. And it's about the people, isn't it, I find, and making sure that you've got, you know, maybe some fresh faces always helps. I mean, I am now guild secretary down here at the TDGR, and I think that's enabled quite a few changes actually within our guild, because I think it had been largely, I mean, there was a few ringing schools in the last 10 years from what I can gather down here, but really not very much in recruiting and retention, and fun things, you know, for the guild. There were the traditional activities, but not a huge amount of fun and new things going on. So that's kind of given an opportunity, because I'm not a traditional kind of I suppose ringing leader. I suppose I kind of grab all the influences from my production background as a production brewer, so I'm liking to, you know, use all the resources all of the time really, and think a bit differently about how we can rearrange ourselves and work effectively. So I won't bore you too much with anything else, but I was actually going back to the thinking, you know, what can I actually do? And I remember this circle of influence thing and thinking about that, because what can I actually control? And because people think I think ringers generally a bit daunted by the challenge we've got ahead of us at the minute. You know, we might have lost several key players in our towers, and we're finding it difficult to hold the rest of the band together. And like David said a minute ago, it's always a balancing act, isn't it, to keeping everybody happy and making sure everyone gets something out of coming ringing. So I think it's just realizing what you can do, and then maybe what's beyond your control a little bit, and then how you can reach out to others to maybe enable to you know, a more effective control, or maybe a different style of organization or something. So I always thought, you know, if it wasn't working well beforehand, and I use the example of Truro Cathedral here, and I might get shot in future for saying this, but you know, we used to have Sunday evensong, and it would be 3:30, ringing for 20 minutes, and like we'd have 5 people, maybe 3 on some occasions, and you just think, well, why am I turning up if there's only 3 other people here? So three blind mice in a cathedral, you know, why would you? So I think a bit of a rethink around that, like, can we extend the time and attract more people? Can we do something else with this time? Can we, you know, anything that wasn't particularly working well beforehand, why would you continue to do that? I think it's really helpful to have a bigger plan. So if you've got a couple of key players in your local area, then engage them and try to think about how you can structure yourselves differently, or use the resources you do have in a different way to kind of add more value, really, rather than eking it out over a thinner amount of time or resource. So I'm knowledgeable. Ed invited me to talk about clusters. I'm not the best person to do that because I don't really know about them, but I do know that before kind of COVID and lockdowns and things, we were kind of working on a cluster basis anyway. I think I know that AJB, if anyone knows his actual name, it's Anthony, isn't it? J and the B, Barnfield. So AJB was wondering whether there could be a concept of like bigger area bands rather than just clusters. But I think whatever you call it, it's grouping together and it's teamwork, isn't it? Because we're all in kind of like non-functional silos, as business speak, isn't it, really? But we're all in our own little towers, and unless we work together, we're all a bit thin on the ground. And what we want to avoid is the 3 people turning up for the practice night and thinking, why do I bother? Whereas if those 3 people are joined by another 3 people in the tower doing the same thing, then that's 6 people, and then maybe they can have a useful practice. So I think that's basically the concept. It's just enabling people to work together to do that. I think Simon Linford recognised that I was trying to do the same thing on the lizard, so he told AJB about that, and it's just about rearranging your organisation differently, I suppose, to support the areas in most need, or the towers that are shouting for help, and encourage people to ask for help if they need it. So we did a bit of work down on the lizard. There was one particularly influential guy called Bob Woods down there who you know, has gone on actually since then to become the district chairman of the Western District. But he was saying that I've got a lot of tower captains down here. They're all over 80. They're going to lose half their bands probably. He just arranged to keep in touch with them all during lockdown, and he was very worried about the recovery aspect of that, and he wanted to be able to hit the ground running with some teaching and recruitment. after, you know, as soon as we were physically possible to do that. So I was just trying to think about how I could enable him to do that from a guild secretary point of view. So in amongst all the lockdowns and things, we managed to hold a couple of AGMs online, and some people gave up posts, and I took on being guild secretary, which has enabled different things to happen, I suppose, and different support to be given, which is quite nice. So yeah, I would always say, start small, think about the big picture, and then think about how you're going to get there. So just a little bit about then what's happened on the Lizard with us. You can see there's a little map down in the bottom right hand corner, and half of that I would say is probably, can you see the line that goes between Redruth and Falmouth? Anything west of that is our Western District, and you can see that encompasses 4 different deanery areas. So I was thinking, as I usually do, I take things very literally to start with. As a guild secretary, I was thinking, well, what actually is the guild supposed to be doing for us? How can we use it better? And so basically, it's to serve the church in the Truro diocese. So I was thinking, well, how can we enable ourselves to be structured better so that we can do that? So I got Bob down on the Lizard to phone up all the tower captains, ask if the tower captains have made contact with the church. And because of all the C of E recovery group was making contact with the central council at the same time, I kind of used that as an excuse. So saying, well, they're doing it from high up, you know, in the structure, organizational structure, so why can't we do it locally? And encouraging people to talk to their churches more about the services they could ring for, any plans. And of course, everyone was desperately scared about churches closing. So I said, if we could get a heads up on that, either from a local point of view or even further up the line, then that's fine. But if we have the contact, then we're enabled, aren't we? So basically, Bob just formed like a bit of a network all the way down onto the Lizard. You've got all the tower captains down there to work together under his leadership, I suppose, and then is in contact with the rural dean down there. So we do actually have, that's like a picture of the actual map. Those are all the towers. Miranda, who is the secretary of the Western District, she actually enabled Bob to kind of collate lots of information that he was finding out from these towers. You can see we've got a ring of 10 down at St Cavern as well, and Landy Wednack, which is the most southerly point on the Lizard, which is a ring of 6. So we've got a tower captain down there who must be over 90, called Headley, can't drive. So a lot of these people don't travel to the other towers nearby. It's quite a long way, a lot of distance apart from between them, and I can understand it's the same in Cumbria, isn't it? A lot of towers are very spread out, not very many together. So that's what we've done. We've kind of surveyed all the towers and figured out how many ringers they would have coming back after COVID, and then if we can measure it, then we can hopefully drive some improvement there, because we know where the gaps are. So we've kind of come up with, well, we'll start for a Wendron ringing school, which is right at the top of the Lizard. It's this ring of 6 here. So I've got my mouse circling round, and these couple of towers are working together, Wendron and Helston here, and we started off with 12 recruits. We started a ringing school early October. I think we've got about 8 left. So, we were expecting some losses, and that's fine, but they've all done really well and they're coming along. We hope to be able to finish in mid-January with them. So we hope to be able to spread them out a little bit. They'll initially go around Wendron and Helston, but we know we need to be able to help these towers further down here, and we've got a lady, Helen, who's actually going to help us further down on the Lizard, and she's teaching quite a few in her tower. So I'm going to stop sharing the slides there, and I am going to just open up the floor really please ask me some questions. And also I've got Lucy Hopkins Till here as well. Hello Lucy, and Mike as well, husband Mike. And also,
hi Hayley, I'm here now too.
I know, and Don is here as well. And so Lucy and Don and Mike are all part of the what are we, a volunteer and leadership group for the Central Council. So we're on that work group, and we'd love to hear, you know, if you've got any questions, if you need any ideas, anything like that. So just fire away. It's supposed to be as interactive as possible. Now I've bored you to death by PowerPoint, so go for it.
Can I just ask about, sorry, Sue Thomas, can I just ask about your ringing school? How far did you expect people to travel, and what do you intend doing about teaching people in the future who aren't travelling to the ringing school you've got in that location?
So down on the Lizard, yeah, it was a massive geographical area, really very difficult, very rural. Good point actually about how far. I think we've initially done the school at Wendron because it's an ideal place, really. It's not surrounded by any houses. It's got a couple of farms and a school around it, really. It's in the sticks. So I think most of the people do live around in that area. I would say a radius of 20 miles. But we have said to them, and I think it's about being very clear about the expectations you want of your new ringers, and we need people to ring for Sunday service. Yeah, we want it to be a massive laugh, it's all good and massive loads of fun, but we expect you to ring for Sunday service because we're teaching you to do that. And also it's how to integrate them back into like the ringing community, because I know they've just been subject to a group of teachers on a Saturday morning, and that's not like real ringing, is it? So we've been saying, well, we're going to invite, so next week is the last session in December, so I've been saying we should invite more local tower captains, which I think we've got about 3 or 4 coming, and also the rural dean, so he can see the progress and the fun actually that we're having in a church on a Saturday morning. We're filling it with noise, activity, and he's very grateful for that, and he knows that we'll be able to then go on and recruit more people off the back of that, because I think having new recruits in a band sells the idea of learning to ring to more people in the future. So they're like your best asset, aren't they, when you come to do some more recruitment. So I would say 20 to 40 miles, I'm going to say that.
And those 8 recruits, you're expecting them to go to different towers?
We're expecting them to go initially just to Helston and Wendron initially, and then we're going to organise a ringing outing in the spring and give them a tour around all the towers in the Lizard and introduce them to the tower captains that haven't come to us to introduce themselves. So by building like stronger forces in one area and then introducing them round, that's the idea, really. Does that make sense?
You. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Do they get attached eventually to any individual tower, or will they still remain a roaming band?
The tower captain at Wendron hasn't got an actual band. He's the only one left there. So we thought it might be a good idea to be able to support him a bit better, to give him like a deputy. So make one of the newbies a deputy for him. So I think that might work. I think that's a really good idea, actually. Going to give them certificates to say that they've been on the course, not ability related, just to say, here you go, you've been a part of this and it's been fun, so well done. I think in time they may decide to ring in at other places, but I think those will be the closest ones to them because of just their location and the area that Bob has done his recruitment from.
Hayley,
yeah,
I got the impression earlier that you were saying that there aren't services at every benefice every Sunday. So the ringers are going round to the different benefices in the deanery.
If we can organise that, that would be really good. I think the church is very slow in this. Is the reality of it. The church is enormously slow at realising what we're trying to do, and I think they're like, well, what do you want from us? And I was like, we don't want anything from you. I just want your service times so that we can coordinate ourselves better.
Right, because I mean, certainly where we ring in our benefice, each of the 3 main churches has a service 3 Sundays out of 4. And the other 2 churches have, I think, about 2 services a month. I was just wondering what the situation is in Carlisle, whether it's more like Cornwall or where we are in Hampshire, where there seem to be a lot more services than you have.
Come on, David.
Well, I can only speak for Carlisle Cathedral. I'm not sure whether you meant Carlisle or Cumbria or what.
Right.
I mean, if I talk about specifically for Cathedral, then they're pretty much back to the services that they were running before COVID. So in principle, we could ring for services, excuse me, services like the Sunday afternoon evensong. Weekday evensongs we never really have rung for anyway, so there's so they're probably pushing the boat out too far, but we're not at the moment simply because we tended to use that previously for attempting quarters as well as ringing for evensong, and at the moment I don't feel that we've got the strength to actually risk trying that, so we're not doing anything about it. We're basically just ringing for special services, particularly around this time of the year, and when we're requested by Dean and Chapter to ring, and also for the normal Sunday service, the main service Sunday morning for the Eucharist. And that's pretty much it, really. We are doing a bit better with practices, but that's where things stand within Carlisle, the Cathedral. There aren't any other there aren't any other active towers in Carlisle anyway, so that's it. But if you look Cumbria, sorry?
In the Guild, what's the sort of situation in your...
Carlisle, if you're talking about the Guild, well, I think I'm not qualified to say so much about it. I think probably people like Chris could say more than I can on that. So I'll hand over.
As far as I know, most of the churches that have got bells around here are back on services, perhaps not as many services. And I think it seems to be a bit of a trend to not do an evensong coming along because people aren't attending it, and they're trying not to go back to it. So because they were never very well attended before. That's a bit of a shame because that's the easiest one to get to ring for, depending where you are and what else you do on Sundays. I think we've had a very long, hard time, and it's showing in the quality of the ringing that we're doing. It's pretty poor, actually. I get very disappointed at how bad the striking's got. And the method range, we understand that people have forgotten that, but I wouldn't have thought something as basic as being able to strike a bell in call changes nicely would have suffered as much as it has done. There's shortage everywhere. We've lost people at Whitehaven, we've lost people at Moresby. I'm sure other places have lost them. Egremont hasn't even started back ringing yet because of the size of their tower. So we're still much in the start of moving on. Moresby, where I'm theoretically the tower captain, it's going to be a heck of a hard job because they've all done loads and loads of stuff on ringing room, and some of them have been ringing quite complex stuff on handbells, 2 handbells in ringing room, but the bell control is not there, the rope size isn't there, so it'll just be always the theory is going to be well ahead of the method rigging, and I really would like some help for people to come and help me get them their rope sights, because I have very firm ways of thinking about how to do that. You can teach rope sight, it's not something that just comes, but I need the support to help me do it, and I don't think that I've even got that in this area. There's just not enough of us, so we're dire. Look back to the days when we had surprise Royal and Maximus at the cathedral in the area, and No, I don't think we'd get that in the whole county at all.
It'd be hard pushed to get a Maximus band at all for any method, or even a Sinks band actually. But I mean, that's kind of not really the point at the moment, is it? Actually, if I could just say one other thing, because I'll just wear my Eastern Branch Secretary hat. There hasn't been much Eastern Branch Secretarying done by me for quite a long time, but from what I'm aware, most of the churches in the Eastern Branch have restarted the services. I'd echo what I say a little bit about the Evensong services, although there weren't many Evensong services to begin with. Wigton is right, it's in the Western Branch just, but because I know them well there, I think they will probably push on with Evensong if they possibly can. But I think the more overriding thing for me is I'm quite surprised in a way. Some of the ringers who I know are capable of ringing things, all right, nothing special, but they can ring bob triples, they can ring grandside triples, or at least they could before COVID took hold, seem to be struggling now more than I expected. It's difficult for me because I've been away a lot as well, so I haven't really been on the ground a lot of the time. But I just think the COVID effect has had quite an effect on people's confidence to ring things. And one of the big things for me is, how do we build people's confidence up? And it's difficult to do it in an isolated little group. I suppose at the cathedral, we've got a reasonable group of ringers, but if you look at most of the towers in the Eastern Branch, it's much more difficult than that. All of us, I think, have lost some ringers, not necessarily to COVID at all, but for all sorts of reasons. Something in relation to COVID, people who are maybe feeling vulnerable anyway and decided they don't want to come back because it's too risky for them, is one example. I can think of a few people like that. And that to me is more the challenge at the moment. And it's down, as far as we're concerned, again, we've got to recruit some more ringers. I'm just looking at the cathedral itself. We had something like just over 20 ringers before COVID, 22, 23. At the moment, I think we're about 14. We've got about 3 or 4 learners being taught at the moment. But we've lost, you can see, we've lost, some of those would have probably have gone with or without COVID for one reason or another. In fact, they did. Some of them were a bit elderly and just couldn't ring anymore. But nevertheless, we've lost about 4 ringers, maybe 5, because of effects to do with COVID rather than COVID itself. And that to me is the bigger challenge, is getting ringing back up to strength. We can't rely on ringers that were there before coming back and starting again for various reasons, all perfectly reasonable reasons from their point of view and from anybody else's, but also because the ringers that are coming back have lost confidence. I'm quite surprised that, on our practice nights recently, when we've tried to practice something like grandside triples, which the plain course we could have rung standing up with the same group of ringers standing on our head 1.5 years, 2 years ago, we can't ring it. And so I'm only the ringing master. The tower captain, Ron, is basically saying, well, we can't ring this stuff yet because it's going to sound crap on Sunday mornings. And he's right. And yet I'm thinking, what the hell's going on here? I find I can still ring most of the methods I used to ring before COVID perfectly all right, but not everybody else is in the same boat as that. And it took me aback a bit. I was a bit surprised. I thought, what's the matter? We've got people who can ring Surprise Royal here who can't ring grandside triples. What's going on? And it seems to be a kind of collective angst. So that's my 6penneth. I don't know how you solve that. I mean, it can only be solved by getting a group together that can support. And I'm interested in this sort of idea that Hayley put out about not exactly a flying squad, people who are prepared to get around, because we've got the same problem in Cumbria. It's an 1.25 hours from Carlisle to Whitehaven, especially if the weather's not too good. It's a hell of a long way, about an hour, something like that, depending,
It's about 2.5 hours from one end of the county to the other for us. So
it would be here. If I want to drive to Barrow, it wouldn't be quite that long, but it wouldn't be far off, probably in winter.
Can I say something? Can you hear me?
Hello, Andrew. Hi.
Hello.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Hayley.
Hello.
I lived in Devon, and for a long time, where there's a huge number of towers without any ringers, but lots of villages with bells. And similarly in Lincolnshire and Nottinghamshire. And what I can see in Cumbria is just the deterioration in the number of ringers compared to the number of bells that there are in towers. So there's only probably about 40 or 50 of us to go around for the whole of Carlisle Guild at the moment. And we need to, you know, stick together with the number of towers that we've got at the moment, and you know, see where we are, and supporting other towers as a centre of excellence, like, you know, those people who have got a better proportion of ringers to their bells might be the way forwards.
And what I'm hearing, and what I generally like to do is just, you know, listen to. So I'm hearing, you know, David's got concerns about quality, Chris has got concerns about quantity, and people not actually having the basic skills to ring, you know, in a very rural setting. How many ringers have you got, Chris, in your Moresby?
I don't really know, because we haven't rung together for a long time, and we're still not ready. They're still not ready to ring together. But I would say we'll get back with about 4 or 5 at the most, having had up to 10.
Yeah, okay. And this is a point that David was saying before, and we have, you know, they've got 4 learners, but really, and this is something that ringing hasn't been doing enough of, has it, for years and years and years. There's like 20-year backlog of not doing any recruiting or teaching. And I think that's been the realization for us down here, is that we're faced with this massive gap now, because we've got certainly not very much youth coming through, and people look at me as a young person, and I'm 40, so you know, I'm not a young person, and it's just not there, is it, anyone younger than me? So I think really it's that if you can get to a point where recruitment and teaching is a continuous program, and you can get people, you know, interested, and there's a real buzz going, even if you start with one ringing school like we have. The idea for us is to then, we held a train the trainer event yesterday to reinforce an art M1 course that was held up in the north of Cornwall last Saturday. So I was, you know, there was no aftercare really for that course, and I was thinking, well, people won't go on and get accredited. And we desperately just need the teaching resource down here, because they're out of, say, 50 ringers, like Andrew was saying, we've probably got about 50, maybe less, but only half of those are actually prepared to teach, and there's very few actually that are, you know, qualified to teach, if we even want to go that far, but I'm not particularly bothered. But it's having to, you know, really get people to getting their teaching heads back on, getting some confidence on the end of a rope again to teach somebody, and reinforcing all those skills so that people can then go away back to their own towers. But I was saying we probably need to be working in little teams here. So I had 12 people yesterday afternoon turn up for that event. So I've got, hopefully, if I divide them into half, you know, and if I lead the next ringing school and then somebody else leads the other one, then we've got 3 under our belt already. So it's just about how you can divide and multiply, really, in as quick succession as possible, while still remaining sane.
Hayley, I think some of the issue at the moment for many towers and in many places is that winter has hit us, and the nights are dark and the nights are cold, added to which people are preparing for Christmas, and they haven't been used to going out in the evenings very much in the last 18 months. So I think for a lot of towers that we're involved with, recruiting isn't something that can be really contemplated at the moment. Maybe when spring comes and the evenings are lighter. So what a lot of towers near us are doing, they're inviting a couple of ringers from 2 to 3 other towers to their practice each week. And sometimes they can't get enough to come, and the practice is cancelled, and then perhaps the following week, you know, they'll get 4 or so ringers or even more from 2 or 3 towers that they've contacted. And so then there's a really good practice. And we know a number of churches where that's happening. Obviously, you have to make sure that you invite the right sort of people, because the wrong sort of ringer can easily put off some of the local ringers. If you know, if they're a little bit alpha male or whatever, you can get some sort of sensitive old ladies occasionally, or whatever, or even not so old, who sort of balk at the stranger coming in, who's the sort that shouts, "Stand! The striking isn't good enough." So one has to be careful and sensitive about who is invited, but with the right personalities, it really works.
And with Lucy having said about the striking not being good enough, Chris, I think, brought it up that she'd noted that striking was going off. Maybe David did as well. I too have noted that even among the avid peel ringers, their striking doesn't have the polish it used to have. So it's a universal thing, and it's just practice. I think we've got to work our way back into it. So from a quality point of view, we might have to accept a slightly lower standard for a little while until we can get ourselves reorganized. And it won't take long, actually. For the avid peel ringers will be back into it within 20 minutes of their first peel. But, you know, it's that sort of thing. The other thing I wanted to say was, you were talking about having a little squad going around to help people. Over a period of about 20 years during the 1980s and 90s, I ran what we called a hit squad in the Newbury branch of the Oxford Guild. And there we contacted all the tower captains, found out what they wanted to do or what they wanted to improve on, if anything. And those that did want some improvement, we organised a small group of competent ringers to go and visit them on their practice night. And with some, it was extremely successful. We managed to get them ringing quarters and improving their repertoire of methods and all this sort of thing, improving their striking, even improving their handling if it was that sort of requirement. But there were some where you'd let the tower captain know that the squad's going to come along for the next 3 or 4 weeks, and the locals all deserted the practice. So you went along and you had a nice little practice among your helpers, but nobody else was benefiting. So you do have to be a little bit careful about how you set these things up.
Absolutely.
Can I just ask, Hayley, our guild's obviously starting to look at recruitment and what we can do differently. You talk about thinking big and starting small. Can you just talk a little bit about how do we think big? How in the long run, in the long term, how many ringing schools do you see? What should we be aiming at? How do we think big? Because until we've got that big objective, I don't think, you know, we need that big objective to then start the small steps to get there.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Sue. What I've done is take the number of towers in the guild, which is like 175, something like that. So Ed's really good at math, so he's going to help me out with this. 175 average number of bells in the tower is 6. There's a recruitment and retention figure to do with the Central Council, which Matthew Lawrence often says. This is 2.5 ringers per bell. So Ed, 175 times 6 times 2.5 is it like 2,000 and something?
Yeah, 2,500 that'll be near enough.
Yeah. So I've gone to our diocese and I spoke to the bishops on Zoom, said to them, we need to recruit. We've probably got 700 members on a good year as TDGR members. So I need to recruit the rest of them. So that's a massive gap, isn't it? And they can see in terms, because some people respond to numbers really well. I don't, but some people do. It's their language. But they can see what kind of massive hole we've got to fill. So that's what I've done in terms of, that's our big objective. Our secondary kind of objectives to getting there is identifying the towers in each district or deanery, and the ones that are absolutely shouting like, help, I need help, you know. And it takes quite a lot for ringers to say, I need help, because we're a proud bunch, aren't we? We like to think we do, you know, what we do very well in our own towers, but to actually shout from the rooftops, help me, help, is a big thing. So I take everyone seriously that says that, and I've got a list basically in my black book that says, so I know that Tucking Mill really want help, because I think they had 7 people before COVID, they're down to 2, something like that. Carbis Bay have never had a ban, that's a ring of 10. I know that we've got a brand new ring of bells going in at Llanteglos by Camelford. So it's a new ring of 8, I think, and a dumbbell for training purposes. And I know they haven't got a band. So that's guild money that's been spent that needs to be reinforced by guild teaching. And I've got very little going on up in the Northern District, and people actually backing away saying, no, I can't do any more. I've done my time with teaching, so I can't. So we're going to have to start from absolute bare bones up there, because the people I know kind of in the Central District where I'm based and out to the west, and there are quite a few members actually out this way, but I think they're a bit further, you know, thinner on the ground up north. So we're going to have to work together a bit more to get that up and running. We've got several things going on the east, and actually St Austell, some of you will have heard about, yeah, little town just east of Truro, St Austell, with a lovely brewery in it. There's a tower captain there actually who's been saying, help, help, help. I've got actually quite a lot of people who want to learn, but I can't teach them. So I've got like a little hit list really of places where we need to go in and do a time limited teaching, you know, direct, like a course that, you know, doesn't go on forever. So you've got an exit strategy before you've even begun, because I think it's too much, isn't it, for people to do. But again, group teaching is quite nice, and it's a bit more fun. You get around the safeguarding aspects that way, and you know, it's not, I think learners appreciate being taught by more than one person, because not everyone has the same teaching and learning style. So I think it's been working very well. So what I've been trying to do is kind of create a model that we can go on and replicate in other areas of the guild. Does that answer your question, Sue? I don't know if that answered it, sorry.
Yeah, yes, I think it did, yes.
Okay.
You didn't set out with a plan of having like permanent ringing schools dotted around the district?
No, because I think investing in hardware, you know, people then go, oh, we haven't got a simulator, so we can't be a ringing school. We can't be a, you know, because we haven't got the money. We haven't got. I think it's the people, isn't it, that we need the investment in. It's not the hardware anymore. It's the people.
Yeah, definitely.
I absolutely agree with you, Hayley, because when we had a survey in our guild of 250 members, only 40 or 50 responded. And we think maybe they're the only number of active ringers in the guild. And we have to draw upon those and their enthusiasm individually, person by person, to somehow build a future. I really despair about ringing, you know, in the future. I mean, I've been a ringer for 40 years, and you know, recruitment's all good thing, but I think we're going to lose the more experienced ringers on the way, to be honest. Yeah.
Hayley.
Hiya, Don. Sorry.
Hayley.
Hiya, Don.
All right.
Go on.
Can I say something? Just a few observations.
Yeah, please.
Okay, I'm basically, for those who don't know me, I'm basically Northern. I've been All Ireland ringing master in my time, but I'm currently Northern Ireland ringing master, effectively, in Ireland for the last, well, my third incantation of it. But when I returned after a sabbatical, if you like, from ringing, I quickly realized that a lot of skills were being lost. And what we had, this is pre-COVID, just for a couple of years pre-COVID, we had a hit squad, as some people were discussing, and I approached each tower as my tower ringing, as being district ringing master, and asked them specifically what they wanted. If they could have anything done, what would they like done? So I then had a team of perhaps between 4 and 8 individuals, including myself, of varying skills, but I tailored the group that would go to that tower, and as somebody else suggested, maybe 4 or 5 weeks in a row, just basically tailored it to whatever it could be. It could be just simply teaching people to ring. It could be ringing call changes. It could be striking. It never got up to the glories of Surprise Royal and stuff like that, but it might have got to maybe a bit of Grandsire and stuff like this, right? So we had that was actively happening pre-COVID. And I felt, and everybody in the district felt, it was very successful because you managed to retain people, not only people who might have gone because they weren't being taught right, but also people who were perhaps getting bored because they wanted to do a bit more and they couldn't have the opportunity. The district then also had district practices, of course, which helped with that as well and pulling together. Now that was pre-COVID. Along comes COVID. And what I had identified, Charlie, just before COVID was that we were losing teaching skills primarily. People who were in their own way very good teachers were getting too old or actually dying. So when I came back after my sabbatical, I realized that we definitely needed teachers. Not to say we didn't have any good teachers, we probably had 2 or 3, but we had identified certainly 5 or 6 individuals who found themselves thrust into this situation of having to teach, never having really been properly taught how to teach anybody. And so I put together a course, an art course, and what appealed to me about art was the fact that you've got it there in a formal way that will never be lost. And if you get those skills can then be passed on. So I identified I think it was between 5 and 8 individuals, 2 or 3 of whom I said were excellent teachers, but they just didn't have the art tick, if you like. But there were certainly 5 or 6 others who desperately needed instruction. And the plan was then we're going to have the course. It was all set to go in April. Bell Tower selected, the whole thing booked. Along comes COVID, of course, and that has to be put on the long finger. We've got hopes for next year, but with Omicron and all this, God knows what's going to happen there. But it's still in place to happen. That's the thing. Because in my opinion, in the North, what we desperately needed was people who know how to teach or have some formal instruction as to how to teach. And then that would expand beyond that. But to do all that, I was also, when I came back, in the happy position of being unaffiliated, which meant I didn't feel obliged to be a member of any particular tower. So I could take myself around on Sundays with my wife and whatever. And I didn't feel any obligation that any specific tower had to have my attention, which it freed me up. So back after COVID then, my time as district ringing master is virtually over. However, I've become, for my sins, assistant district ringing master, and which means I've got some involvement still in that. But the plan is still in place for the teaching of the teachers. But what I have done is I've now formally joined St Mark's Bell Tower. Some of you may know it. It's a very fine 10 set of bells, set of 10 bells linked with C.S. Lewis. They had no members. We've now got an active practice going there every Wednesday. I'm ringing on Sundays. I've managed to, including myself and my wife, we've got, I suppose, basically 4 or 5 members who can ring, and another 5 or 6. These are all older people, by the way. We haven't got any young people, but all older people who have managed to begin, and they're making good progress in the teaching. But again, getting back to this thing others were talking about, which was a teaching centre. Yes, you're quite right. You don't need all the equipment and stuff. It's more having the attraction of the centre. So not to boast myself, but the fact that we have this active practice happening in St Mark's, I find has now attracted a few other people back to bell ringing, who are then hopefully passing on their knowledge and certainly at least keeping themselves active by joining our practice. And not only that, but they're also letting the learners see what's achievable. And there are maybe 2 or 3 other towers now in Northern Ireland where they do have practices, and we go around as best we can to their practices as often as we can, and they come to us. So it's becoming kind of becoming a teaching hub with these other satellite centres. And one of the big benefits I have found is that the towers that during the COVID period developed WhatsApp groups and kept in touch that way was a magnificent way of retaining ringers, because I mean, my phone used to never stop ringing about different recipes and all kinds of stuff that they were doing in these other towers. But at the same time, it helped the team spirit. And there's no doubt that the 3 or 4 towers, which I know are making good progress, all benefited from having that kind of link. So that's you fairly well up to date with what we're doing over in Northern Ireland at the moment. And hopefully that'll become a teaching centre. Hopefully, well, we've got at least 5 or 6 new recruits, and then 2 or 3 other centres. There's also a couple from other towers that are coming to me because I can't be everywhere. And definitely, that's that kind of team approach, a global approach. We're going to have a meeting of the management committee of the district to try and put in place some of the more formal things, the district practices and stuff, and see what progress we can make with that. But I'm trying to cover all the points, so I don't want to take up too long, but that's the gist of what we're doing there in Northern Ireland. Remember, Northern Ireland's got 18 bell towers. It's the size of Yorkshire, so we've got all kinds of distance problems as well, you know, but that's what we're at.
Thanks, Don. That's good. That's a good summary of what's going on. I agree with that. If people have not struggled so much keeping ringers, if they've stayed in touch during the lockdown, but I think we're too late talking about that now. I mean, it's either happened or it hasn't, hasn't it? Yeah, it's worth kind of scaling back what you're doing at the minute to enable a bit of a fresh like review of or thinking of stuff. I mean, maybe Chris could get her band to ring handbells for services, and then slowly get a practice night going, and then slowly get, you know, people actually learning to, you know, ring tower bells sensibly, and that could be a bit of a transition, a managed transition over a year, say, where you still do handbells well, you know, that's really nice and it encourages team spirit, but have a go at tower stuff and get going, you know, with rope sight and things like that. And it's the same theory skills, isn't it? I doubt it would take a year, but it might. It's just about the kind of being clear with people, isn't it, about the time scale and your commitments, and trying to manage what you want to achieve and don't go crazy because it's just exhausting, isn't it, if you do. But
going back to something that was mentioned earlier of discovering that some ringers have lost the ability to strike over the last 18 months. One of the things that I mean, I've found that too at the towers we help out at. And so I've found it's quite useful to at one point in a practice say we're just going to do some stuff to help us concentrate on striking. I never mention names. I never correct anybody's striking, because it's no good someone learning to use someone else's ears. They need to learn to use their own, and have a little session where you just ring rounds and say, oh, there's still something not quite right in the middle, or something backstroke's not quite right somewhere at the front, or and if the rounds gets good enough to go on to call changes, where you don't call another change until the last one is right. And that kind of does focus people. And then, you know, a bit of kaleidoscope, plain hunt, and the very most treble bobbing. But those sort of simple things where people aren't thinking about the method or what do I do at the bob, they can just focus on their striking. And I think that is something that can be quite useful.
Yeah, can I say something about that?
Yeah, can I quickly reinforce what Lucy's just said, because at Truro Cathedral we just do rounds. If we've got 12 people that turn up, we just ring 12, you know, all 12 in rounds. And that's the tower captain has said to me, is that okay that we just do that? And I was like, yeah, of course it is. And when I run practices and he's, you know, in his absence, when I'm in charge, I say, right, so for the first half of the practice, we're going to focus on like bell control and getting warmed up and limbered up and stuff so we can do what we want to do. And then the second half we'll focus on a bit of striking, so we'll have some fun, maybe do some twinkle twinkle, so twinkle twinkle little star for the first half, which they all find hilarious, and then maybe a bit on listening skills, so get like 50% of the band to face out of the ringing circle and 50% in, so they can listen and just ring rounds. But it's too radical really for a cathedral band to be doing stuff like that, but I think it's a lot of fun, and you've got to be able to mix it up, you know, and say very clearly what you want your band to achieve of the practice night, because it's there for all. Sorry for interrupting you, Andrew. Your go.
Oh, it's only me. Yeah. No, I just feel that, again, there's not enough ringers in the Carlisle Guild to support the value and talent that there is there. And I think we need to centre that into centres of excellence like Wigton and the Cathedral, and support them in whatever way we can. We've got some very, very talented people in our guild, and I've been in contact with no end of people in the last 3 hours prior to this meeting, trying to encourage them to go forwards with ringing. And yeah, I'm getting a good response, and I will happily organise quarter peals with people, because that's where my background comes from. And I think we need to support that way of thinking, because that's where my thinking came from.
I'm going to have to say adios amigos, thank you very much for having me, because it's 3 o'clock, so I've got to shoot off to the cathedral now for evensong, and hopefully there'll be more than 3 people there.
It's been really interesting. You've come up with some good stuff for us to think about. Thanks, Hayley.
Well,
Much
I'm
appreciated.
always here if anyone wants to pop me a direct line. I'm absolutely, you know, happy for that, and if it helps at least one ringer, then that's been worth it for me. So thank you very much.
I think we should summarise the ideas and send out as a message to everybody what they've missed. But that's great, Hayley. Thanks ever so much.
Cheers. Bye.
Brilliant. Thanks, Hayley. Thanks. It was great.
Thanks, Hayley.
Now, between Lucy and Hayley, we've got a whole load more ideas we can be thinking about, haven't we, really?
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. I'll not put